Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 10 of Prepared for Takeoff. I am your host, Kushan, and today, as always, I am joined by my co host, SSN 754.
Good afternoon, sir. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. And today is a special day for us because we are having our first guest on the podcast. We're,
Absolutely,
we're
yes.
joined by Mike C. from the World War III 1987 blog.
And welcome, Mike. How you doing today?
Not too bad. How are you guys doing?
All
I'm
good, all
doing
good.
pretty good, all things considered.
All
Great.
things considered,
Appreciate
yes.
good. Appreciated the invite. I'm very glad to be here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very cool. Very cool.
So,
Well, what's on the plate, Kushan?
Well, what's on the plate is not much today, other than interviewing Mike here. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
there wasn't all that much flight sim news. There was a couple releases for P3D this week, but you know, try to stay
hmm
out of that sort of stuff because there's just so much of it. Really feels like devs are just trying to like get everything they can out before 2020 releases.
Yes, yeah. I
Although
get
I'm
that
gonna start
feeling
calling
too.
it Microsoft 2021 just to like make everybody mad.
The hedge you bet. It could be.
Yeah, but
So,
first, though, you built something this week, and
yes,
as I
yes.
said on the pre-show, I have to give you your.
Plus, I wanted to run something, have something that'll be able to run command the big scenarios very well. So I took the plunge with the tax money, bought a and started buying parts on Amazon. I used PCPartPicker.com to match all these parts up, and ended up getting a pretty beastly system. It's to run down the specs. It's a Ryzen 5 3600X. It runs right around 4.0. It overclocks itself on the fly, which I think is really cool. It's got a MSI Radeon RX 5700 8 gigabyte card, and I have done some stress testing into that with into the MSI Afterburner app, and it's outperforming 2070s right now. So according to the stress test, that so I'm very happy with that. And so it's a pretty fast machine, and it's going to be the centerpiece for coming up for at the FS 2020, FS 2021, whenever it releases. And hopefully I'll be able to run that to my heart's content. But yeah, that was what I did this weekend. I started it up yesterday for the first time. Been doing a lot of software installs like everybody has to do with this kind of thing, and
Very
getting it tweaked.
nice.
So, yep, that was my weekend, and uh, and then of course leading up to that, when I haven't been looking at parts, I've been reading this wonderful, wonderful blog this guy has put out. Mike, this World War III blog, the, the War Gamer's Bible is Naval War Gamer's Bible is of course Red Storm Rising by Clancy,
True.
and so that's my base. Hunt for Red October, the same thing.
All of those, yeah.
All of those. So that's where we come from, basically on that. And you have just it's like a whole new Clancy book. It's great. So
Well,
I'm
thanks.
glad you're here. So Kushan,
Yeah.
if you want to go ahead
Definitely.
and lead into this, go ahead, bud.
I just want to make a comment of you do realize that Microsoft Flight Sim 2020 is going to be optimized for NVIDIA cards, so you should totally not have done the Radeon. On the flip side of that is I'm really interested to hear how the Ryzen does because I've been looking at the Ryzens.
Uh huh.
I'm really split between the higher clock speed and more cores, so let me
Yeah.
know how that works out. But
Absolutely. Yeah.
I still can't believe you went with a Radeon card. That's all I'm gonna
But
say. But
man,
that's
the
that's
radio
just me. It's
it's
your
out
it's
outperforming a 2070. It's 20, not just a 2070. It's outperforming 2070 supers. So that's just, to me, that's just, I think I made the right choice. I haven't had any black screens or any blue screens of death yet. So yeah, I'm happy with it right
like I
now.
said, it's your
So
machine. You are free to do whatever you want with it,
that's
and
true. That's
my
true.
my,
Everybody.
my opinion matters not.
That's
But you're still wrong.
okay.
Before we get into the blog, there is one little bit of Microsoft Flight Sim 2020 news, in that they are scaling back dev diaries for the foreseeable future due to the coronavirus crisis going on right now. They've pushed back the multiplayer update from late March into, I believe it was early April, and the IFR update or dev diary from late March into, or late April into either further late April or early May.
Yep.
So, not completely unexpected, but still pretty sad. But hopefully, this doesn't actually impact the rest of the development.
No,
I'm
no, I
sure it's
don't
gonna.
think.
I'm sure it's gonna affect it somehow, but hopefully, it's not too big of a thing when all is said and done, as far as release dates and such.
Yeah, yeah.
So, with that out of the way, let's get talking with Mike here about his wonderful blog.
Yes.
Sounds good.
So,
Yeah. How did you get into it? I mean, do you have prior writing experience?
Uh, as far as um, like fiction, just short stories,
Hmm.
some novellas and things like that.
Okay.
Uh, just like you guys, Red Storm Rising and Red October, they were always those were the gold standard for
Hmm.
techno thrillers, and I always wanted to try one out like that one day, just kind of get the opportunity to do it. And
Uh-huh.
back in May of 2017, it started kind of by accident, and it's just kind of grown from there.
Yeah. Very
As you've
cool.
seen.
Yeah. Very cool.
So,
Do you game it out? Do you? I mean, do you have? I'm assuming you have command, and
oh yeah,
and
definitely. Command has
so
been,
yeah, that's cool. I mean,
yeah.
as long as you get the game it out, that's great. I mean, do you have any? Have you written any scenarios?
I do have a couple scenarios up. I think on Command, there's one World War III one that I got up for
Uh huh.
the Baltic approaches, the fight for air superiority over Denmark.
Okay.
I'll put a link for that on my Twitter. I think it's actually that one switched over to Command, from Command from the first one to the new one.
Okay.
So you shouldn't have any issues finding that. But I'll pop a link up on my Twitter if you guys
No
want to check it
problem.
out. But aside from that, yeah, I've done a couple other scenarios here and there. I did a bunch that are affiliated with the blog that I haven't published yet. It was just one
Mhm.
of those things where I put it together to see how actions were going to flow in a certain theater on a certain day, and take it from there. Southern Front, there were a lot. Central Front, actually, there were more than I thought there would be. A lot of the air scenarios were gamed out using command. The land scenarios really couldn't. But on the air side, a lot of the work was done for the Central Front using command, and the same with the Northern Front and all. And so it's been invaluable. It's a great platform. It really is.
Yeah. Kushan, we have talked to not taking away from your work, but we've talked to like the guy who did Northern Fury, and of course he has all his scenarios there too. So it's
He
good to
does, yeah.
hear. Yeah, it's good to hear that that you're using command to uh, to game things out, because that's what I do. I jump in the sandbox all the time and I build stuff, and
Definitely.
it never gets published. It never will see the light of day, but I get to game
Right. Same
stuff
thing here.
out. So yeah,
Yeah, I mean it's so realistic.
yeah,
I mean, you guys know that as well as I do.
yeah,
That it would be really foolish not to use it. I mean, we use
yes,
it. We use it at my job, my company.
hmm,
We've been using it since it came out, and we're a think tank.
very
And
cool.
there's a lot of think tanks. There are even some government agencies and even combatant commands, I think, that have been utilizing it
Hmm.
since it came out.
Yes, yep.
So definitely
so
harpoon on
along.
steroids.
Sorry, go ahead. Didn't mean to cut you
No,
off
go
there.
ahead, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say.
You're
So
good.
along
You're good.
with Command, I see you did some board gaming. Was that for
Yes.
the land combat side of things?
Yeah, that was. And actually, it was for the naval side too, more long term. I tried that out because, to try to game out the entire conflict on command was just not going to work. From day one until the last day of the fighting, it just wasn't going to work. There was too much dead time in between action and things like that. So I tried Second Fleet, of course. The whole Fleet series was used,
Oh wow,
and
yeah. I used to have all of those.
oh, they're awesome.
Oh
They
yeah.
really are.
What I done to interrupt here, but what I
No,
used
go
to
ahead.
do with Fleet was I had 6 Fleet. I had a big tent, like a ping pong table. I played those games on, and I had 6 Fleet and Second Fleet, and I believe what was the one? The Third Fleet was down in the Caribbean. I can't
Yeah, Third
remember.
Fleet was
Yeah, and I had them
Caribbean and
all.
Baltic. Yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah.
I had them all connected, where
Oh,
it was
awesome.
one big ward game. And yeah, that's good times. That's growing up right there.
That is.
You
Well, you
know,
know what
long
I
time
did?
ago.
Yeah. What I did was I took the pieces from all the games and just put them in one box.
That too. Yeah, that's what I
Yeah,
did.
so that
Yeah.
way I could take the carriers from Seventh Fleet and start using them in the Atlantic or, vice
Yes.
versa.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was a lot of fun.
Oh, absolutely. And the good thing about that whole series was the game rules didn't really change from
No, they
like
didn't.
Sixth Fleet on. I think the last one was Fifth Fleet, and
Yeah,
then they didn't really change. So all the game pieces were interchangeable, really. So
right,
yeah.
right.
Yep.
Yeah, and which is a good thing. But I hear they're coming back out. I hear they're going to relaunch the Fleet series.
As a paper game.
I don't know if it's
Oh.
going to be paper. It might be as a board game. I'm not sure, but I've been
Oh,
hearing a
well,
little
that
bit
would be
that
cool. That would be cool.
it
I
would
mean,
be.
I
It
have
really would
not
be.
seen this. I will have to go look it up.
yeah, I had to go check that out. That would be very
Yeah,
cool.
check that out. And I don't know if you guys noticed, there are a couple of fleet scenarios that were switched over to command format.
I believe I've seen a couple of those,
Yeah, I
maybe in
think
the
I put
community
one up.
stands.
Yeah, I think I put one
Interesting.
up for Second Fleet. There's also one up for Seventh Fleet. I just saw. I don't know if that's up on the if
I'll
it's
have
part
to
of the
check that
community
out.
games.
I'll have
Yeah,
to.
check
I'll
that
have,
out
I'll
though.
have to go check it out. Yeah.
I have the master list of the community scenario pack right here. In fact, it
Oh,
is what's on
excellent.
my list of things to do after we're done recording.
Yeah. See, it's update time, isn't it, Kushan?
It's update time, but
Yes.
um, so I take it before you did the wargaming. I take it Red Storm wasn't out yet. Well, I guess it wasn't out because Red Storm
It
was
wasn't.
released
Yeah.
last year I think it was.
Uh huh.
Yeah, that was all right. That came out after the blog started. I was kind of annoyed about that too. I really wanted to use it.
I'm
Yeah, I
telling
saw
you
it come out and I was
that
like,
was
oh,
in development for the longest time.
considering the amount of detail that they have in there and just how good of a game it is, I'm not surprised by that.
Do you have it?
I finally got it. The second printing.
Oh,
It was sold out by the time I went for it.
yeah,
So I,
I have the first printing sitting on the shelf that's still not opened, and then I actually the other day I have a really hard time. I don't have like a lot of like table space in my house,
right.
so I've actually been I fired up Vassal the other day with the Vassal module, and
Oh, there
started
you go.
actually laying
Yeah,
it out in Vassal. And so my
good
intention
move.
is over the next couple weeks to start playing some Vassal scenarios.
That's
And
that's good. I'll tell you what. On that note, though, Vassal has been a big help too, as far as when it came to gaming out the blog. Because like you, there's times I just don't have the table space at my place, or just don't
Hmm.
have the time to do everything. So, if I'm taking the Acela from Washington to Boston, I've got a few hours to kill. I can, play a couple of turns, using the Vassal for a game. Like, I'm trying to think which ones I used it for.
so have you already
MBT.
played out the entire war, or do you kind of play it out as it's been going along?
Most of it, the entire war, like as a broad stroke, has been done. That's done and outlined.
Oh.
Um, a lot of the battles have, some of them haven't though, because there's new gaming systems coming in, or sometimes I just want to change something that's already there. So, like to give you guys an example, let's say that for Germany, um, I used the operational art of war for like the big broad picture, the big picture. But for like the battles inside of the scenario or inside of the hex, you can't really use that. You want to see more detail, so you got to go to another gaming system. Sometimes I would use maybe Steel Panthers 3 Brigade Command. I don't know if you guys ever played that
Hmm.
one.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, or Steel Panthers MBT, or um, any of the other games available, just to kind of get a better picture of how that brigade or division size battle will play out.
Hmm.
And Fifth Corps was good too. That's another good board game.
Have you played Armored Brigade?
I was just gonna say that. Have you played Armored Brigade?
I did. I was playing the freeware version,
Uh huh.
and I loved it. I thought it was awesome. I was just kind of hoping they'd come out with more. And then once it came out as a standalone game, it was great.
Yeah.
And I've used that a few times. That's actually, I just had to go back and make some changes because I was using that for one of the upcoming days on the Central Front. And it's really flexible. It really gives you a lot of options,
Yes, it does.
especially with the new add-ons. So there's a lot more countries coming in, a lot more
Yeah.
formations and weapons.
Yeah,
So
it's a lively community of that armor brigade people.
So
They
have you ever
yeah,
had
it
to
is.
like do a sub like, all right, well there's no west or there's no say East German units in this game system. So have you ever had to sub in like Soviet units?
Yeah, for that game, yeah, that's really the only thing you can do is put the Soviet units in, or maybe try to use the equipment from the Soviets that these Germans would have. Maybe
Hmm.
swap out the T-80s for T-62s or T-72s. The BMP-2s for BMP-1s, and just try to do the best you can because sometimes you can't make an even swap. So
Yeah,
you gotta just
interesting.
You just
Very
got to
cool.
get hypothetical and go with it.
yeah, pretty much. So, and that was a problem with some other parts of the gaming too. You would just have a good game for land and air combat, but it wasn't too good for the sea side of things. It was kind of like broad. So you'd
Yeah.
have to kind of find another game to fill in the void there. Like for the southern flank, Aegean front was great. I don't know if you guys ever tried that out, but it's great on the land and air side of things. But on the sea side, it's not so good. So I had to swap in command.
You know,
And
oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I know, no, you're good.
No,
You're good.
I was just going to say, we were talking about playing the fleet games back in the day when I was a kid, but I also used to have this war game. It was by Victory Games also. It was called NATO: The Next War in Europe. I don't know
Oh,
if you've
that
ever
everybody
played
had
that.
that one. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, oh yeah.
And so that was my land version of World War III, and I would have the sea battles with the fleet series. So
That's a good idea. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
So
yeah. I kind of did that too.
so have you ever like kind of like kit bash the rules from different game systems into like one board? Like say take the air rules from one system and then while you're for like air support and take like the rules from one game system and apply them with the land rules from another system.
Oh, definitely.
As far as
I hate.
paper games, yeah, you kind of have to
Yeah,
if you're
you do.
kind of
You
mixing
can't
matches.
just.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I tried to do is I tried to just keep it as streamlined as I could. So I took the land rules, I think, for I'm trying to think which one I used on the board game side of things. It may have been War in Europe for the big picture
Mhm.
when I was trying that out. And
Yeah.
the air rules from Red Storm were great. I don't know if you guys ever tried that one out. The
Hmm.
Air War Central Europe.
Yeah,
That is really a great
Yeah.
game.
Yeah.
yep, it's actually sitting in like I said sitting in Vassal right now waiting for me.
Is that-
I need to get into Vassal. I just, that's something I have not seen in years, and you guys just not brought it up. I'm like, oh, I went straight to the
yeah.
website. I'm now installing it as we speak. So,
Well,
I had fully intended on getting Red Storm onto the table when it came out, and then it just kind of got buried as things do under work for me, and then
yeah.
it wasn't until recently where I'm like, I should really play this.
Well, you know what
yeah.
I did? I took the rule book, like before I even really started looking at the game. I looked at the rule book and the scenarios, and I just started to try to figure out which ones were going to be compatible for command. Kind of, create for maybe a command scenario.
Uh-huh.
And there are a few of them. I did two already. They have to be, polished, but there's definitely some good scenario fodder in there for command.
Oh, most definitely. I was reading through the
On the air
Soviet
side of
list the
things.
the other day, and I'm like, wow, some of these would be really great, and some of them probably not so
Yeah,
much, but some of them would be pretty cool in command.
definitely,
Um,
definitely.
I was
Scenario
actually
two.
what was that?
Oh, God. A scenario two for that is the one I was putting together, and I've been having a lot of fun with it as a command scenario. It's kind of a fighter sweep from the Soviet side
Okay.
at the start of the war, and I forget the name of it offhand, but it was really good.
Yeah, so I've been kind of working on some Cold War scenarios in command, and I hope you don't take this personally, but a lot of them are really similar to what played out in the blog.
Oh, that's fine.
I was started reading through Central Front the other day, and I was reading about your F-117 strike against the Soviet command bunkers, and I'm like, it was kind of almost like, are you kidding me moment? Because I what I had done was I haven't actually built it yet, but it's kind of one of the scenarios that I have outlined, in that I had taken basically what the coalition did in Desert Storm 1, of how they used
Right.
the F-117. I'm like, all right, well, in a war, in 86 in Central Europe, all right, they would have gone after army headquarters, and the front headquarters. And I'm like, all right. And so I started to plan it out, and then I read that, and I'm like, wow, this this looks really similar to what.
Yeah. Great minds think alike.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
It's kind of
there was probably a little bit of Clancy in there with Operation Dreamland, but the Ghost Rider in the book is a lot different than what the F-117 actually turned out to be.
right. Right. He was on the right track though, to an extent.
He
He was
on
Yeah.
the right track. And
Yeah.
I had actually, I applaud you for doing the Central Front in command, because I had started that was the first scenario I ever started building. Was
That was the
basically
first one.
Yeah.
That was the first one I did too, believe it or not.
was basically I had started building Dreamland, and then I got into it, and I realized it was going to be the biggest. Like, at that time, the game couldn't support it. I literally crashed the
true.
game because there was so many units trying to basically be calculated at the time, that this was way back in Commando, circa 2013, 2014, I think was when I was.
Oh yeah.
And like I crashed
Those
the
were
game.
slow days.
Yeah, I mean,
I did
it
too.
it
Yeah.
couldn't handle it, and I broke the game multiple times before I just kind of threw my hands up and said, I'll come back to this at some point in the future. Because it really would have been the largest, air battle I think the world has ever seen.
Yeah,
It
pretty
would've
much.
been,
I
yeah,
mean,
absolutely.
I mean, even if you just take the fraction, say a quarter of, the forces available at any one time, to leave some down for rearming, some down for rest, and the usual kind of operation cycle, like, it still is just, it's still a ton of
Yeah,
aircraft
you're right.
flying around.
Yep.
yeah, and that's been the whole thing with the game, from the beginning. If you would make the scenario too big, you would crash the system, or worse, it would just kind of like pause in the middle of a scenario, and that was it.
Sure. Yeah.
It's gotten better at that,
That-
though. It's
It has,
definitely.
it
I
has.
mean, I was running. I've been streaming Northern Fury on the Southern Twitch channel on Saturdays, the last couple weeks, and like H Hour is just a huge scenario, and
Oh, it is,
it's running
yeah.
a little slow, but like that scenario, whilst I mean, I could play that scenario solo, but before, way back in the day, I couldn't have played that scenario and streamed at the same time. And
Right.
while
Right.
it was running a little slow, when I set it to 1 or 2x time compression, it runs fine. When I set it to 5, it's a little slow, but it handled it just fine with no issues.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much what it is. If you try to do it, at a 5 or higher, that's when the problems really start to creep in, and
Yeah.
it goes from a good scenario that's moving along good, and then it just kind of stops. It's like hitting traffic.
Well, that in effect, you
And
can
then it'll
easily
start-
miss something that you needed to see. So
Oh, very true. Very
Yeah.
true. That's
Yeah.
happens a lot.
Yeah, one of my reasons for picking up Redstorm was I was hoping it would kind of finally break like my mental block that I've had over how to do Central Front scenarios, and I never
Does it
really
help?
thought about it, but I really liked how it kind of limits the play area in some of the scenarios.
Yeah.
And
You're
I'm
right.
like, why didn't I think of this? Like, it's so obvious. You can just have a no-fly zone around the play to kind of limit the
Yep.
scope of it, everything that would be going on outside of your particular, strike.
Right. That's a good point though too, because a lot of the people who start, a lot of folks who start those scenarios, they're thinking they have to do the whole entire, front airwise.
Yeah.
They have to put in
Yeah.
every aircraft, every SAM system, and a lot of those you don't really need. They're going to sit there and do nothing for the whole scenario.
Yep.
So if you don't need 'em-
creep is a bad thing.
Oh,
And
it
that-
really is.
That's kind of
Good
where
lord.
I had started way back in the day with my Cent Front scenario. Was I had started with everything, and then I kind of tried to pare it down, and even
That's a
paring
good
it down,
approach.
I was still kind of hitting limits with both the game and just being even manageable.
Yeah.
But
You know
I'm
what? I
definitely
think
looking forward to getting
in those
back to
early
it, though.
days, yeah, in those early days, I think we all just kind of, when we were building scenarios, we really pushed the envelope on what command could do.
Oh yeah, yeah,
2013, 2014, and
yeah,
even when every update comes out, I just want to keep pushing it. It's like, all right, can I do
yeah.
this? Can I do this?
Yeah, I kind of feel
So,
like that if you're not pushing the limits of the game system, you're not trying hard enough.
oh,
Oh,
did
I
I
think
lose
you
you?
dropped out. I think you dropped out.
Yep, I think it did. Yeah,
Oh, there he
Can you hear
is.
me now?
Yep, you're
I
there.
gotcha now.
I
Yeah.
muted the mic while I was taking a drink, and I hit it, and it didn't take. Um, I kind of feel like if you're not pushing the game system, you're not trying hard enough.
Oh, absolutely.
Agreed.
Yeah, yeah.
Agreed.
There is a
Definitely.
reason that my El Dorado Canyon scenario has taken me 4 years to build, because I've
Wow.
literally tried to simulate every almost nut and bolt of that operation,
Yeah.
down to a T. And there are some things within the game system that trying to abstract wasn't exactly the easiest thing in the entire world.
Yeah, it's not. You're right. I can't wait to try that. I really can't. Really looking forward to
I
that.
have been given a few glimpses of it, and Kushan is this is his his masterpiece. This is his Mona Lisa. It's just it's going to be great once it gets out there.
It's also your fault.
It is. I was so. How did that all start? By the way, I remember I was talking about that book, right? It was the book about the El
Yeah, we
Dorado
were
Canyon.
talking about I can't remember the author of the book, but we were talking about the book, and you just made an offhand comment of, "Wow, I'm surprised somebody hasn't done El Dorado Canyon," and I
There
said,
you
"All
go.
There you
right,
go.
I'll do
See what you
it."
did?
And then
It
here, four
just
years on, I could have written a master thesis in the time and effort that I've put into researching that scenario. In fact, the other day, I just I rebuilt it from. I know we're getting really off topic here.
yeah.
Sorry.
That's all right.
But I had basically rebuilt it from the ground up for CMO, because I started to implement Apache's search and rescue scripts from the rebuilt standalone scenarios in CMO. And as I got into it, I'm like, wow, there's a lot of things that I did kind of by brute force with my scripting that could have done better, and some things
Right.
that were just wonky with how I did it, because it really suffered from the fact that it took too long to do. So you could tell where my breakpoints were as far as working on it. So I basically have rebuilt it from the ground up. I've redone all the scripts. I've implemented search and rescue. But where I was going is that I actually found out the other day that the targets are actually wrong in CMO. Their default
Are they?
imports actually have the Aziza barracks, the Sidi Bilal Naval Complex, and the Benghazi barracks all at the wrong locations. They're close, but they're not quite right, so I adjusted all of them
Right.
and
Hmm.
rebuilt them in Google Earth. And then I think it
Oh,
was
awesome.
2 or 3 weeks ago, somebody on the Slytherin Twitch channel when I was streaming asked me if I was still working on a El Dorado Canyon, and said he had the tanker call signs, which
Oh,
have been like
awesome.
my personal bane, because I haven't been able to find literally anything on the tankers. Even the tanker numbers are like, seem to be
Yeah.
hard to pin down. But yeah, I looked, and assuming that his stuff is accurate, which I have no real way of verifying it, but I have no better information, is that he has all the call signs that were used.
Oh,
So
excellent.
yeah,
Right there. Now let me ask you this. For your this is kind of funny. I'm interviewing you now. Um, do you have Operation Prairie Fire in there too, or is it just El Dorado Canyon?
right now I just have El Dorado Canyon. My plan was
Gotcha.
to do Prairie Fire. In
Okay.
fact,
I guess.
I may actually do both of the Gulf of Sidra incidents.
Uh-huh.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Yeah.
Although
Yeah.
the thing with the Gulf of Sidra incidents is that I'm not sure how the AI would handle it, um, because there was kind of like aggressive maneuvering, but then it's such a small scale that I'm not really sure how well or how entertaining it would be for the player's perspective
True.
to
Yeah.
do. Whereas like El Dorado Canyon is kind of on the other end of the spectrum, where there's like literally, if you played in real time, there's 6 or 7 hours of basically babysitting tankers and fighters, and 5 minutes of action, and then another 6 or 7 hours of babysitting tankers back to Lakenheath.
Exactly.
And
That's
I
exactly, yeah.
yeah,
Nailed
I
it.
mean, But that's the challenge of the scenario for me is that you know is getting that right. And some people had suggested, well, just do the strike with the Air Force units passing Sicily, and I'm like, no, that takes out like the whole part of the operation.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, if that's the case, yeah. If they're going to pass through France and come down, then there goes your realism. That's really not how it went.
Yeah.
There was
they came
actually a
all the way
version
around.
I had done that actually had a random event that would remove the no-fly zone over France and or Spain, and I actually
cool.
took it out because even though there still would have been some babysitting tankers over France, it kind of took away something from it when I did that. I thought it would be like, oh, well, this would be a cool bit of randomization, and then as I play tested it, I'm like, no, it's
Right.
Yeah.
hard to describe, but it just didn't feel right.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
Yep. It's a historical scenario, so it should be done the right way.
Yeah, and I mean I do have random events like right now. In the rework, one of the last scripts I did was reworking the Libyan response. So there is a chance, although a very small one, that the Libyans will actually launch fighters when they detect the raid.
Oh,
so
I like that.
It's really small, and even if they quote unquote make the decision to launch, which is a small chance, a random roll, then it also does kind of a double blind where it'll roll whether the fighters even launch and what type. So it's not really a guarantee, even if they do decide to do something. But the other part of the event also activates the weapon release authorizations. They start basically at 0, and then when the event fires, and it also kind of represents all the various warnings. The Soviets warned them a couple days before the strike. Malta and Italy obviously warned them. I believe it was an NBC news correspondent actually called the Libyan foreign embassy, I think it was, and asked.
Yeah, there was something like that. Yeah,
and asked if they about it, and so I kind of took all those and kind of combined them into one yes or no. Does Libya actually respond to this, or do they ignore it? And so there's this, like I said, where I'm going is there's a slight chance of things playing out slightly differently, but I tried to get it to play out as historical as I can,
sure,
with some minor variation just for replayability.
Gotcha.
That in the scenario has F-14s, and I feel guilty if the F-14s just don't get used.
Yeah, he is a major F-14 fan.
Because everybody knows the F-14 is the best, 19 Cold War fighter the U.S. has ever made.
Well, I'm not going to argue with you there. So,
not even going to respond to
that. Yeah. Now, are you prior military? Are you retired or?
Air Force, yeah.
Air Force, okay. I was in the Air
Force. Yeah.
Oh, that's why the hatred for the F-14. I was sensing something there.
Yeah. It could go a little. It goes a little deeper than just the service branch, but yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, personally, honestly, I love the Tomcat. It's a great aircraft.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, I had the chance. My squadron and I, some of us were invited out to the Roosevelt one day to, take a look at carrier air operations. And it's a different world. It really is, and really had a great time. And that was not too long before they really started to leave the fleet. They were starting to transition over to the Super Hornet.
Was it early 90s, Kushan, was it?
Early 2000s was when the Tomcat started getting
off.
retired. I think they were gone by 03.
03, there you go.
I think 06 was their last cruise.
06? Okay, maybe it was 06. I thought it was
the mid-2000s.
Yeah, mid-2000s.
Yeah, but if they would have upgraded to the F-14D, they'd probably still be around.
That's true. Yeah.
Or even the very super Tomcat build units. I think Grumman issued basically new build F-14s with updated avionics and such for the basically the program that resulted in the Super Hornet.
Yeah.
Right. Very true.
Battle Cat or whatever they called it. Yeah.
I think it was like the Super Tomcat. I think is what they called it.
Tomcat 21, I think.
Or AST 21. It's Advanced Super Tomcat 21.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, for what it did, after the Cold War ended, they turned it into the Bombcat, and it did the job
Mhm.
very well. So
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
yeah, it was.
it's done a good job for our Navy and of course the Iranians too. So
Oh yeah,
it's a good
definitely.
bird. So, but man, but anyway, your blog has caught our attention, and whenever I'm not working, I'm trying to read some of this, and
I'm glad to hear
I'm
that.
probably I'm within I haven't read as much as Kushan has. I think I'm still in the second or third day of the war, but it's captivating. It really is. You've done a great job at writing
Well,
it,
thank you.
and it's
Thanks.
just you know, hopefully someday you'll find the inspiration to make it into a book form and put it
Well,
out there. We'll see.
I've been I've been working a little bit on a narrative version.
Uh huh.
It's not going to be it's that's not on the same level as what's in the blog.
Sure.
And the
Well,
blog really. Oh, go ahead.
have you ever read the book The War That Never Was, which was
I did. Yeah,
okay. It's something like that would be right down the alley for that, I think, in that kind of narrative. So
I think so. Yeah, I was thinking
yeah,
along those lines too.
yeah,
And
yeah. Who was that? Michael Palmer
yeah,
was the author of that, I believe.
yeah, and that was
And
pretty much just a air and naval version too.
yeah,
That handled the
it
air and
was
naval
all
side of things. Yeah,
basically a military chronology of the of World War III is what that was. There
right.
were no Clancy love stories going on, anything like that. So
Nothing like that. Yeah, it was
yeah,
just
but
straight
it was
air
a
and naval, and
yeah,
for the most part, it was.
yeah, for the most part, yeah, yeah.
So have you
Yeah,
But
it's a
yeah,
considered
good one though.
turning the blog post into like an ebook or a PDF that can be downloaded?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that lately because the blog has really gotten a lot bigger than I ever thought it would. So
hmm
I've really got to either reorganize the website to make it easier to access, some of the
hmm
days and some of the theaters, or I've got to do a PDF. So I'd like to wait until you know the war is over before I do the PDF. So considering that for the next couple of weeks we're pretty much all going to be home, working from home and have a
that's
lot of free
true.
time,
Yeah.
I might do the upgrade in the next
Yeah,
couple of
I mean
weeks.
that's why I kind of read through like Northern Flank and Baltic, is they were basically attached to each other, and so
hmm
Right.
I basically opened up Northern Flank and I basically scrolled down to the bottom and started from the top and basically read them kind of concurrently, and then I feel like Central Front was kind of its own thing for the most part.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Well, I guess I guess when I say Northern Flank, I mean North Atlantic and Northern Flank. I kind of read those both kind of at the same time,
Gotcha.
along
Gotcha.
with Baltic, because they're kind of all in the same, kind of the same area of operations.
Yeah, those three are kind of connected in certain ways. Even more so now. Yeah, at this point in the war, there's really a big connection between those three. And the Central Front is the Central Front. That's just going to be its own animal any day of the week.
Uh huh.
And the Southern Flank too. The Southern Flank is tied into the Central to an extent, and then you've got the peripheries, the Middle East, the Pacific, which is kind of getting hot now. Oh no, you guys haven't finished.
I haven't got there
Oh,
yet.
okay.
no.
Sorry. But yeah, there's things happening all around the world right now,
Yeah.
you know. So
Well, I can't wait to get to the rest of it. I know Kushan is also in the same boat. Wonderful job with it, though.
So,
Absolutely, Mike.
so the
well,
real
thanks.
question that everybody wants to know is when are the carriers finally going to strike? Like they've been kind
Very
of
soon.
sailing around the Bering Sea now for what seems like days and just kind of doing their own thing, and then it seems like we're just going to get the entry where they actually strike Kola, and then it's like nope, tune in next week.
I've kind of been dragging that out a little bit, but a little bit. But there's been things happening, in theater and outside of theater that's affected that.
No, no,
But
I'm not saying it's not
yeah,
warranted. It just seems
yeah,
that Strike Fleet Atlantic isn't really being aggressive.
Uh huh.
yeah. It's not. It hasn't lived up to its potential to an extent. The backfires came out a little bit, and they had to deal with that. And then there's been a couple other things happening. The air war over northern Norway had to be settled one way or another,
Yeah.
and that's slowly starting to happen now. Andoy is back in NATO hands, and
hmm
air superiority over the north is pretty much almost there. So
So
it's
one
coming.
one question I
It's
kind of
coming.
do have is I'm gonna kind of compare it to Red Storm.
Okay.
Is like Red Storm, like it seems like it basically took the better part of a month or two to basically play, get where it seems like NATO is in the north, and
Right.
we're on. I think you're on day 11. Did you ever consider drawing that out farther, or and just kind of having kind of skip days in there, or was your intention to write literally every day of the war, so to
Well, the,
speak?
well, the original intent was I was just going to do every day for the Central Front, and I was going to do kind of summaries, maybe 1 to 3 day summaries for each other theater. And I don't know what happened. It kind of went from that as an idea to doing every single day. And I think one of the reasons for that is that there's so much time in between doing the days. Like for one theater, I'll do, for example, I might do, D+11 for the Central Front now, and I'm not going to get back to the Central Front until maybe May or June if I'm lucky.
Hmm.
So
Because I think
there's a
if
lot going on.
sorry, go ahead.
Okay,
I was gonna say because
no, go ahead, you're good.
it seems based on like your releases, it's like you kind of take care of like all the basically D+11 and all the theaters, and then go to D+12 and kind of cycle through.
Right. Yeah, I usually try to save the Central Front for last. Um, but I've kind of gotten into a routine now. Usually I'll start off with the peripheries, and then we'll go Northern Flank, North Atlantic, Baltic. Well, Southern Front. It's a Southern flank before Northern, and then I'll end with the Central Front,
Hmm.
and then maybe do a couple entries about war games or movies or something, and then we'll get on to the next day. So, so
Actually,
that's pretty much been the pattern.
actually, going back to kind of wargaming for a second, the other thing
Sure.
I noticed was really interesting is that I threw, as part of my Cold War scenarios, is I threw backfires at Keflavik, um, because I happened to come across the notes that Larry Bond wrote for him and Clancy's Let's Plays of Harpoon for Dance of the Vampires. So as part of that, I was throwing backfire regiments and Badgers at Keflavik, and I noticed that with 3 regiments, you don't really damage the airbase at all.
You're right. Yeah,
And
there's not much
like I
damage.
noticed
Yeah.
that and then I read through found the raid in your blog, and it was basically almost the same results that I had.
Yeah,
Like
I
didn't
when I
scratch the
gamed it out.
airbase at all.
Yeah, the airbase attacks, they really didn't do much damage as people would expect, and
Hmm.
that's that's the same in real life too. Like the missile attacks we just saw, the Iranian missile attacks against our base in Iraq, really didn't do that much damage. They launched about 16 or 17 missiles, and
Hmm.
it wouldn't have shut that base if that was wartime. It wouldn't have shut that base down. That base would still be operational. So you
Yeah.
figure for 2 or 3 regiments of backfires, by the time they make it to Iceland, the Eagles are going to have a field day. There's definitely going to be some attrition. So, out of those missiles that are launched, how many of them are actually going to make it inside the base perimeter, let
I had
alone
a
hit
lot of
anything that's going to be
misses.
vital?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I did too. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and the same thing goes for cruise missiles too. You just it's kind of a crapshoot, for that time period.
It is. Yeah.
You
Which makes
just
me really
don't know.
interested when I start throwing AS4s at a carrier group in, because I am gonna do that scenario, the classic. I don't like GIUK scenarios in command. I think they're overdone, and I don't think really anything, hardly any of them bring something new to the table. But I am gonna,
Standing near.
but nobody has
Oh,
actually done the classic, backfire versus NATO carrier group scenario, especially letting you play as the Soviets. So that's
true,
kind of
And
true.
my perspective on it. Um,
I think you're right.
yeah, as
I
far as I
used
know,
to.
nobody actually lets you play as Soviet naval aviation.
Yeah, you're right.
yeah.
The other
I
thing that's
actually.
really interesting is that if I've been scouring Google Maps of Kola, and there's not a lot of bomber bases up there. I mean, there's a
There really
couple.
weren't.
There's a couple
Uh,
of diversionary bases, but there's definitely not. Unless you have multiple regiments based at one base, there's not a lot of assets the Soviet naval aviation could have
that's
brought.
kind of what they did. Let me see if I have my list here of the bases. I can't think of it. I know Africanda was one where they had some bombers there.
Hmm.
I thought Africanda was actually a PVO base.
It was. I know it was, but I know that some of the Soviet contingency plans had for bombers to go there when they were
Oh,
staging and dispersing.
okay.
So,
I mean, that's pretty much where I was gonna go to actually get any, because I really wanted to try and replicate Red Storm with the kind of Polar Glory, but I just don't think that's going to be possible. But also 3 regiments throwing it against a carrier group also doesn't seem like it's going to be that much.
yeah.
So I pretty much at this point was like, all right, well, whatever base is up here, I'm just going to put like a squadron of bombers here, a squadron of bombers there, and
Yeah.
I'm going to throw them all at the carrier groups.
I'll be honest. What I usually do is, for a scenario like that, if I'm putting it together, I'll just make one base and call it Cola Airfields, and just kind of,
Simplify things.
yeah, the air bases aren't really going to come into play unless you're going to
That's
be launching attacks against them.
that's true.
So,
Yeah, especially if
you know,
you did something like because the other thing with command air base is that you also risk potentially having more aircraft than one air base can support. So in that case, I guess you just do something like multiple air base, Kola Air Base 1, Kola Air Base 2,
right? You could
Kola
do
Air
that.
Base
Yeah, there you
3.
go. Yeah, unless you really want to get technical and start, naming the bases and putting down everything. I mean, you could do that too, but unless
I
you really need it in your scenario, that's kind
th-
of just,
that's a good point. I am I am a sucker for scenario creep. It
Yes,
happens more time than
it is.
I want to admit.
It
And I think
happens a
that's a
lot.
failing of a lot of command scenarios is getting a little too complex for the situation.
Yep.
happens to all of us. So I mean, it's just part of it. It happens to all of us, and we want it to be as realistic as possible. So sometimes we have to be reminded that,
Not every
you
nut
know,
and bolt matters.
exactly. We
That's
can
true.
kind of leave out a SAM site or an air base or, sometimes even a squadron, and it's not really gonna.
Oh no, no, squadrons can't be left out. That's too much.
All right, I may have gone a little too far there.
Yeah. All
So,
right.
yeah.
So what's next for the block?
Next is going to be, I got to wrap up Baltic approaches. I'll probably do that today or tomorrow. And then we're going to jump into the Central Front, which is going to be, this is going to be a big one for D+11. There's going to be a lot going on. And, after that, I'll probably pop out a couple of, just gaming scenarios or something like that. And then we'll go right into D+12, try to get as much done in the next couple of weeks as possible.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is kind of like an unexpected vacation.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. So may as well take advantage of it.
yeah,
And,
absolutely.
just go from there. But the nice thing is too. I mean, I got to mention some of these places, and especially in the Baltic approaches in Denmark, some of these bases and some of these areas I've actually been to,
Oh, very
and
cool. Yeah.
yeah, and
That,
it's kind of
that,
nice. I was over in England for a while, so
that kind of makes it a personal touch, then, doesn't it?
yeah, it's one thing to talk about it or do some research on a certain
Uh-huh.
place, but it's entirely different to have been there and actually walked
Yes.
around and seen it.
Hmm.
The
Yeah,
same thing with Battle.
I kind of got the impression just from certain things on the blog and things you've mentioned here and there on Twitter that like this was before you had obviously said you were former USAF and that that you had actually been over there and had some experience with some of this,
Yeah.
Right, right.
It's
especially
like it's
on
like
maybe some of the planning side.
it's like you
Yeah.
knew almost too much about how they were going to mobilize, especially for the Dutch there. So it was, or
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Danes, the Dutch. So
It
yeah, it
was nice.
was.
I mean, a lot of that was going back and reading a lot of the literature,
Uh-huh.
the pre-war literature, and a good part of it too is actually a chance to be able to talk to some Danes and some Dutch who were
Uh-huh.
in the service around that time and kind of get their take on it and all. Because
Yeah.
but by 1987, the advantage really was in NATO's corner. Um, it
Hmm.
was 1985. I'd mentioned that once to Collier, I think. 85 was really the tipping point. Anything before 85, the Soviets still had an advantage, although
Hmm.
it was kind of diminishing.
Well, that
85
was
was when. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, 85. About that time was when the Abrams and the Apache,
Right. They were.
those started showing up on the battlefield. That was a game changer. So
Yeah. That's when. Yeah. Right. That's when things really started to swing towards NATO in their favor.
yeah.
So is that why
The
you
Reagan
chose
buildup.
87?
Yeah, because everybody was doing 85. I mean,
Yeah, it
there
makes
was no
sense.
way around that. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
figured 87 was good because there was a lot happening.
Huh.
Um, that seemed like it would have been a good time for, a little bit of a coup in Moscow,
Hmm.
getting rid of Gorbachev. His
Yeah.
reforms were taking effect, and Romanov was still on the scene. So that's how that kind of worked out. But 87, I did some research on it too. 88, 89 might have been a little too far along. So I took 87 and ran with it. And so far it's worked.
Very cool. Very
Yeah, no,
cool.
I think 87 seven's a great year. I've done obviously a little research on here and there, and what the Soviets had, and I think one of the things I found out is that the Northern Fleet didn't even get backfires until like 88, officially
Yeah, that
anyway.
was a little, yeah,
Yeah, they didn't get their backfires till late. Obviously, they have them in the blog, because what's a North Atlantic conflict without backfires, right?
that's just
Yeah.
it.
It just would be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, they were still around, but it was a matter of,
They weren't.
the numbers are
Yeah,
pretty limited.
they were around, but they were either long range aviation or transfers in, I think, from other fronts.
So naval aviation had a limited number, but long range aviation had them. So
Yes.
and
Hmm.
yeah, and the Badgers were still there, for
Yeah,
what
the
good they were.
Badgers and the Bears. Yeah. So
So did you ever
You know,
consider doing doing the Clancy with the target drones?
I thought about it, but that's already been done. He did it, and
And
yeah.
just didn't want to copy that?
didn't know I copy it, and I I set the backfires loose once already on the carriers, and that was kind of it was a very fluid planning and everything. It was one of those things where the Bears found the carriers, and the backfires launched, so there really wasn't that much time for them to plan. And there's going to be another run at the carriers by the backfires. That is coming. I will
Hmm.
say that.
Well, the other thing that
Uh,
what I found is interesting is that Soviet naval aviation doesn't seem to be concentrating its forces that much. Like I would have
yeah, they're really
expected,
not.
like, oh, here's a carrier group, let's throw everything we have at it, not let's throw a regiment at it or two regiments at it.
True, but you got to look at what else is going on in theater. They've
True.
got at this point they've got still Norway is still a kind of just a significant fighting going on there, and now they've got Sweden in the mix. So that's taken away a lot of your land-based bombers. Because suddenly now they want to hit targets in northern Sweden and Finland.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's
So
amazing how
mission
far
failed.
the war's expanded. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, that wasn't something that was in the original idea and planning, but as time went on, it was moving in that direction.
so was there ever
So,
actually any unofficial contacts between NATO and Sweden that should things go hot that Sweden would have come in on the NATO side, or was that just something that you kind of created as a narrative?
there was some discussion about that actually, and quietly and between Brussels and Stockholm, it was kind of understood that if Sweden came in, if war came, Sweden would kind of be pro-West, pro-NATO,
Hmm.
and
They didn't want overflights from Soviet fighters. That's what the
that
deal
was
was.
the big thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that was the big thing. But if it came down to it and war came and Sweden was going to jump in, it definitely would have been. They were planning to do it on the NATO side. It wouldn't be just Sweden for Sweden
Yeah.
Yeah.
or
So
anything like
so
that.
the other one last thing that kind of question I have is that I take it since you've mentioned like after war records and releases that everything's not going to end in nuclear fire.
No Armageddon. There's not going to be any Armageddon, but there may be a few mushroom clouds here and there. We'll
Okay.
just have to wait and see.
Not that I'm trying to like have anything spoiled or anything like that. Just an
Exactly.
observation that I've kind of noticed is that you've mentioned an after a war, so that makes
Yeah.
me think that there's not going to be a complete breakdown of the strategic balance.
Yeah, there will be some post-war records. They may be written in stone, on
Okay.
rock, but there
Sounds
will be
good.
some.
Yeah, I'm curious to see where things are gonna go now that you've got the Northern Fleet SSBN sorting.
Yeah, that's going to be something that's going to open up a can of worms, so to speak. Because I don't know if you guys read far enough into it until you got to this point, but there's kind of a little quiet agreement between the United States and the Soviet Union. They're going to keep their strategic forces as
Basically in
constrained as
port.
possible.
And
Yeah,
I believe the U.S. agreement was that they wouldn't disperse their B-52s.
yeah, or launched or put their boomers out to sea
Yeah.
in large numbers. But
Okay.
things kind of changed when Strike Fleet and Atlantic came into the neighborhood and started when those first bombs dropped on Nikola, that one little airstrike.
Yeah.
That changed the way the Russians are looking at things. Now they're looking at the survival of their missile subs. So, what do you do? Keep them in port and lose them, or sortie them and escalate?
Uh huh.
Exactly.
So, yeah, not a good decision to make.
Or you could just do what the subs do during a hurricane and just sink them to the bottom of the fjord and then just sit there on the
Yeah.
bottom while the airstrike is going overhead.
Exactly.
But
You never know.
I think that's anything else that's in it. I don't think I have any more questions.
Oh man, he has covered
I mean,
everything I wanted to talk about. It's just a great website. I'm glad I've got tuned into it, and I
I'm
probably knew
glad you
about it.
guys.
Yeah, I probably got clued into it a couple years ago, but it was a bookmark and one of those that in my library of Commando and CMO bookmarks that just got lost in a clutter. And then we started talking about it a few months ago, and I've been reading it ever since. So
Right.
kudos to you for that. So
Oh, my pleasure. My
yeah,
pleasure. And
no, definitely. Thanks for stopping by. I really appreciate it. The blog's
thanks for
great.
the.
I
absolutely,
mean,
yeah, great.
I can't gush about it enough.
Yeah, yeah, it's a great website. It's right on the same par as school what or Clancy and Bond have done. So absolutely, it's
Thank
great
you.
stuff.
Yep.
So
And thanks for the opportunity to come on and talk to you guys about it.
yeah, no
Yeah,
problem.
Um,
no,
Yeah,
we'd love to have you back on in the future.
yeah, absolutely.
Anytime. Sounds good.
Uh huh.
All right, guys. We'll enjoy the day,
Okay,
and
you too.
Have a great one.
Uh huh.
you too. Enjoy the upcoming vacation we're all gonna have.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's what you want to call it.
That's really the best thing to call it.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
Alrighty. Well,
all right, guys.
again, thanks a lot for being on, and we'll talk to you later.
No problem.
Yep. Have a
Sounds
good one.
good. Take care, guys.
Take
Uh,
care. Hi everyone, Kushan here. Sorry we were a little rushed to get things finished up. SSN had to go, and we forgot to do a proper outro. So you can find Mike on Twitter at World War III 1987. You can also find his blog at www.31987.wordpress.com. You can find SSN on Twitter at WolfSonar. Also find him on the various discords as SSN754. And you can find me, Kushan, as Kushan Gaming everywhere. I am at Kushan Gaming on Twitter. You can find me on YouTube at youtube.com/Kushan Gaming. And on Twitch at twitch.tv/Kushan Gaming. And with that, thank you for listening, and we will catch you guys next time.